Hello, everyone. Thank you, Siri. It's my pleasure to present some joint work on macroeconomic policy and conflict prevention. This is work with Rafael Espinosa from the IMF, Professors Hannes Muller and Christopher Rao, and myself. So just to give a quick kind of motivation to the topic. So what we're trying to do here is to use publicly available IMF program documents to study the effects of macroeconomic policy on conflict. So here I will talk you a little bit through our NLP method. And we want to understand what are the violence, either reducing or increasing effects of macroeconomic policy of specifically related to the IMF. So the IMF and financial institutions have a crucial role to play for conflict prevention, and we really see that peace and development. So there's work done by Matthias Turnig and Dominic Rona, who describe the complementarity between peace and development objectives. The thing is that it's not really that clear. So there's one key challenge for introducing armed conflict prevention rather as a key objective for macroeconomic policy, not just increasing the fiscal balance or reducing inflation. The first is it's not clear a priori whether acting based on uncertain forecasts of armed conflict is a good idea in macroeconomic settings. This means that by this I mean, we know that in quantitative forecasting of conflict onset, this is a low precision environment, so you have to accept that there may be situations where you intervene and conflict will not have materialized there. The second question is really what we're going to drill into today, and this is the main objective of the paper, is what policies should financial institutions and the IMF enact and in which settings. So it's important that macroeconomic actors consider the fragile context in which they're operating and adapt policy accordingly. So our main starting point is the IMF MONA database. This basically covers this covers the formal commitment structure of IMF arrangements going back to 1993. So it's not as simple as simply like the IMF kind of intervenes in a given country month and then that's it. These programs go on over several periods, several years often, and we'll have what we call an R0, and R0 is kind of the original program approval document. And then there might be 6 months later an R1. This is kind of a revision of the original program, or an R2, R3, R4, all the way up to kind of R6s, R7s, and R8s. So these are not individual like one-off treatments. They tend to be staggered treatments, which introduces kind of difficulties for causal inference methods. Okay, so we assign those to basically a 0-1 on the country month for any given R document, whether it's R0 or R5. And I should say that each review is tagged with generic policy indicators. So this kind of form the starting point for our own policy topics, but we don't rely on the coding within the MONA database. They're very high level and don't give us much information about what actually the IMF is doing in these programs. Here's a little world map. So we see that the IMF is for all MONA reviews. The IMF is very active in West Africa, in South America, and in parts of the Middle East. Then I come on to the real kind of the NLP part of the project. So here we have letters of intent and memorandums. These are basically documents that capture the qualitative emphasis of IMF engagement. This gives a kind of a story of the whole economic situation. What are the government's policy commitments? What are the conditions under which IMF financial support is requested? So this really captures the context in which the IMF is acting and what the policy actually is. This is theoretically a government document, but it is in practice drafted jointly with the IMF staff members, and they kind of come to a consensus on the policy agenda. I should say that there's heavy NLP pre-processing, which I won't get into here, but basically we take these documents, we chunk them up, and then we map them back to these kind of MONA arrangement, that map them back to the MONA database by extracting their document date. So in total, we have kind of 1,374 documents across a large temporal range and many countries, and this gives us kind of a total of 1 million chunks. So now we need to say something about what these chunks are actually talking about. So we came up with a taxonomy of 25 policy topics in total. This covers a broad set of different policies: monetary and fiscal policy, social spending, pensions, governance, etc. We use a guided but topic classifier with 25 topics, and each chunk can be assigned up to 2 policy topics. So it is possible that a given chunk of text is kind of talking about 2 different policy areas. And in that case, we want to capture that. Or we set a minimum threshold of 0.3. This means that we don't kind of blindly assign topics to chunks which are genuinely not talking about any of our policy areas. So here you see a heat map. So just to explain this very quickly, on the columns, you see our full set of 25 policy topics. On the rows, you see these kind of what we're calling here character clusters. So I mean, 25 policy topics is a lot to work with. So this is really like a dimensionality reduction technique. N is the number of documents. So if I take pension reform, for example, we have 117 documents assigned against the pension reform character. And this number 6 means that a document assigned to pension reform has 6 times as many chunks talking about pensions relative to all other documents. So if I look at another one, for example, this anti-corruption and AML governance is talking about money laundering, capacity development, a little bit about fiscal governance and rule of law. So you can see that these are also kind of almost act as policy bundles. So here's a quick case study from the IMF, from Pakistan, sorry. So you see on the top panel, I'm plotting UCDP conflict fatalities. On the bottom panel, the IMF social unrest index. These bars are IMF review documents. So again, you see kind of the first document here would be an R0, and then this would be an R1, R2, R3, R4. So you see how the treatment is kind of repeated over time. There's two kind of blocks here, one post-financial crisis, one around between 2014 and 2016. So I should talk about these little arrows as well. So these little arrows are indicating, did the situation improve? So here, this little green arrow is saying that conflict fatalities have reduced relative to an 18-month rolling average in this country month. So I should say, so a little bit of context. The first program here is post-financial crisis, significant amounts of conflict with the Taliban, influential in Pakistan. This was a $7.5 billion IMF program, and it's assigned to our monetary and reserve stabilization, and you also see some general and macro structural. So here, Pakistan has a inflation crisis due to an oil price shock, and the IMF is intervening to help here and to stabilize the fiscal deficit. Then you see kind of post-conflict and post-IMF intervention, conflict starts to calm down. And then the IMF, again, is also active in Pakistan, operating under energy and state-owned enterprise reforms. This is kind of targeting the electricity market, where there are costly and poorly targeted subsidies, low efficiencies in supply and distribution of electricity. And you see that these kind of 2 blocks have very different flavors. The first is kind of an emergency reform. The second one is much more of a long-term traditional development program rather than being responding to an actual crisis. Now, this is clearly anecdotal, so the way I'm and descriptive. So our next task really is to get into kind of more causal inference methods. So here I'm just showing you a little chart of a match difference in difference method. This is kind of abstracting away from the policy flavors at all and just looking at IMF programs in general. So any IMF program not mapped to any kind of policy topic. And we do see some effects, a reduction in conflict, particularly after around a year. And in the last 30 seconds, I would just say that in our next steps, we're looking to extend the causal inference method. It's really difficult to overcome selection bias here. And we also want to have kind of a flexible topic clustering method. This means that what we assigning topics to programs should match what experts such as Raphael know about IMF programs. And yeah, I think that's me out of time.